Hello everyone, welcome back to ThoseYGOguys. I'm your host Alessandro. In this video, I'm going to be discussing how to prepare yourself against the upcoming new Shaddoll archetype that is coming out in the Duelist Alliance, and since sneak peek is coming up on the 9th of August, which is about this Saturday by the time I'm making this video. So yeah, let's get ourselves to prepare the upcoming really good contending meta deck. Do I believe that Shaddoll is tier 0? Honestly, I had to differ. I beg to differ on that statement. I don't think Shaddoll is the deck that many people are hyping up. I think Shaddoll is a beatable deck, and I think it's just overhyped. It's overrated as well. There are ways to stop against Shaddolls. I mean, you could say that for a lot of decks, but I mean, it's not as good as what a lot of people are saying. So, that's that. And without further ado, without keep you guys waiting, let's get started with the list. First up, we have Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. Shadow Imprisoning Mirror is a continuous trap card that states that negate all dark monster effects that activate on the field or in the graveyard. So basically, majority of the Shaddoll monsters, minus the certain El Shaddoll fusion monsters, basically they're all dark. They activate their effects while they're flips, because they're all flip effects, well, the main deck ones, and pretty much majority, if not all, activate in the graveyard. So, just flip this one up and you pretty much limit their options of activating their effects. So that is one of the most key parts of utilizing against Shaddolls. Up next we have Soul Drain. Now Soul Drain states that you can activate this card by paying 1,000 life points. Monsters that are banished as well as in the graveyard, they cannot activate their effects that start a chain. So basically this is very important because Shaddolls like to send their Shaddoll monsters, the main deck ones, to the graveyard to activate one of their effects that activate in the graveyard, which gives them like massive advantage, where it's like searching or or retrieving, or I don't remember what it was, but I know simplifying game states is part of their effects. So that is something to keep in mind on that. Up next we have Majesty's Fiend. Now, if you're playing a deck that revolves around tribute summoning like Monarchs, or to a certain extent like Heretics, then Majesty's Fiend might be a good card to try out. It's a level 6, 2400 attack beater. Excuse me, guys. It cannot be special summon, which that kind of is a bummer, but monster effects cannot be activated. So if you don't rely on monster effects that often, then Majesty's Fiend might be a good card to try out, because this will hurt the Shaddoll, most of their monster lineup, a lot. Up next we have Skill Drain. Like Soul Drain, but in a different way of fashion, you can activate this card by paying at 1,000 life points. The effects of all face-up monster on the field are negated while those monsters are face-up on the field, but their effects can still be activated. So this one can shut off continuous effects as well. So that would shut off the mid-rash ability, so that way you're free to try to spam out monster special summoning spamming as much as you like. This is good for decks that are not hampered by skill drain, such as Dragon Rulers or Dark Worlds and so forth. So this one is a pretty good card to try out. Up next we have Skullmeister. It is a very unique hand trap from the Star Strike Blast. It's a level 4 1700 attack beater. During other player's turn, when a card effect is activated in your opponent's graveyard, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard to negate the effect. So basically, you just shut off any potential card to activate in the graveyard, like the main deck Shaddoll monster, or even the Shaddoll monsters that activate their effect to retrieve one of their Shaddoll spell or trap card. This card is a very nice surprise, and then if by chance you can use Soul Charge to bring him back with another level 4 monster, and then you can make into your rank 4 plays. So there's that benefit right there. Yes, it's a pretty hefty price, as you guys can tell. The average is $15.69. Is it required for you to run him? Not really. Basically, majority of the list that I have in front of you is varied from a wide range of prices. Could be like probably from the most expensive card to like the cheapest card that you can find. So, yeah. So that's that. So up next we have Forbidden Graveyard. It's a quick play spell card that you can activate this card by discarding one card from your hand to the graveyard. The effects that activate in the graveyard this turn are negated. So when your opponent activates their Shaddoll fusion spell card to send their Shaddoll monster in hopes of triggering their effects, you can flip up Forbidden Graveyard, just say no Shaddoll monster in your graveyard will not activate their effects. So that is a very good and unique way of shutting that play down. Up next we have the continuous track card Royal Command, which is a very old school continuous track card with a simple statement: negate the activation and effects of all flip effects. Guess what? Actually, I take that back. All of the main deck Shaddoll monster are flip effects. So that's great. Unfortunately, the Shaddoll fusion monsters, well, they're not flip effects, so that is a bummer. But in terms of the main deck option, this is a pretty good card to eliminate. But mind you, this only stops the effects of those monsters that are on the field, not in the graveyard or so forth. Other good options for you to run we have is Abyss Dweller. Basically, while this card has an Xyz material and is originally water, it gets all water monster gets a 500 attack boost, including himself. And once per turn during either player's turn, you can automatically detach an Xyz material immediately in hopes of preventing any effects that activate in your opponent's graveyard and shut them down. So even if he leaves on the field, so it's a pretty good, solid rank 4 monster to try out. And then along with that, you also have Armades, Keeper of Boundaries. If this card attacks or is attacked, your opponent can activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step. So this is pretty good against pretty much when you use Armades attack into their face down Shaddoll monster. It has 2300 attack, so it can run over mid-rash, so that's another plus right there. Nephilim cannot able to just automatically destroy Armades through her effect, since her effect activated during the damage step, but it is a pretty big monster, so you need to make sure you have some sort of protection for Armades, such as like damage step tricks, like Forbidden Lance, or Honest, or through battle traps like Dimensional Prison, stuff like that. So Armades is very good. So now let's move on to the next category, and that is preventing the Shaddoll monster from hitting the graveyard. Because when the Shaddoll monster hits the graveyard, their effects kicks in where they can retrieve their Shaddoll spell or tracker from the graveyard back to the hand. So one way is we can prevent them from fusion summoning, basically through a card known as non-fusion area. And with a simple statement stated, neither player can fusion summon. Short and sweet. Couldn't say anything better. This is great against decks that revolve around fusions summoning, so Shaddoll will be really hampered by this card. This is also a pretty good card whenever heroes become big once more, so do give it a try if you do have this card. Up next we have Defusion. It's a quick play spell card. Stated, target one face-up fusion monster on the field, shuffle that target into the extra deck. Then, if all the fusion material monster that were used for its fusion summon are in your graveyard, you can special summon all of them to the field. So, when your opponent makes mid-rash and you be like, nope, activate Defusion, get rid of mid-rash, not having that stuff because, you know, mid-rash, Nephilim, I mean, the El Shaddoll monster in general is a pain in the neck to deal with because basically the El Shaddoll monster, they revolve around not only to retrieve the Shaddoll spell track card when they are destroyed and sent to the graveyard, or I mean, whenever they sent to the graveyard, but they revolve around like anti-special summoning mechanic by means of special summoning restriction on your opponent, or destroying them immediately through their effects, or punish them for even trying to activate their effects or so forth. So, you know, Defusion is very good in its own sense. Up next we have Mispolymerization, a very funny, unique common card from the GX series. Basically, it states that activate only when a fusion monster is special summoned. Return all face-up fusion monster to their respective fusion decks, or aka extra decks. Because back then, fusion decks was basically the proper term because all you run were fusions. Synchros and Xyzs weren't a thing back then. So, pretty good card. It's very good when your opponent does fusion summon, but of course, its cons is, I mean, once they already establish a play and not making their special summoning on their fusion monster, then this card probably become dead, unfortunately. So there are pros and cons on certain cards, but you know, I'm trying to give out a list that can help you guys out. Up next, we have Compulsory Evacuation Device. For the reason, if you're not running Compulse, well, by the time Duelist Alliance hits to the metagame, you probably want to make sure you're running it. Because basically it's a simple statement. Target one monster on the field and return that target to the hand. Or the extra deck, depending if that monster you target is an extra deck monster. Such as Fusion, Xyz, and Synchro. So, pretty good. Track card, very generic. Alright, so next category, Banishing. Yes, Banishing is a very unique mechanic that really punishes a lot of the meta decks because since they revolve around having stuff and using their effects in the graveyard. So, what's one way to prevent them? Get rid of them from the graveyard or preventing them from hitting the graveyard, and by means of special banishing. First up, we have Nobleman Crossout. It is a normal spell card where you can target one face-up monster on the field, destroy that target, and if you do, banish it instead of sending it to the graveyard. And if it was a flip effect monster, like all main deck Shaddoll monster are flip effects, both players reveal their main decks and banish all copies of that monster and banish them altogether. This is good if you're using a different deck other than a Shaddoll deck against a Shaddoll player, because I mean this card is a nightmare if you try to do a mirror match. So if you are running Shaddolls, I probably suggest to stray away from this card by all means. Up next we have DD Crow. DD Crow is a very unique hand trap where you can activate it during other player's turn, and you can discard this card from your hand to target one card on in your opponent's graveyard and banish that target. So whenever your opponent makes their selection through their El Shaddoll monster on their target Shaddoll spell trap, or even, I believe, through the effects of Shaddoll Falcon to target one Shaddoll monster from their graveyard to their side field, you can use DD Crow, banish their selected target so that way they cannot fully resolve and regain their advantage. So that one is a pretty good card. Up next, we all know Banisher Radiance is pretty much Macrocosmos on legs with 1600 attack, so it's a pretty low attack, but do keep in mind that that with good protection, it can really help out quite well enough. Macrocosmos, one thing I like about Macrocosmos or Banisher is the fact that it's a trap card, so you can use that as a surprise element, or for whenever your opponent making their big play, like activate Shaddoll Fusion to fuse their monster, and then you like chain Macrocosmos. All your fusion materials goes to the banish zone, so they can activate any additional effects. So that's good. Dimensional Fissure, pretty much banish any monster that have been sent to the graveyard instead. Debunk. We all know Debunk is a pretty good, solid counter track card, which negates the activation of the effect monster's effect that activates in the hand or in the graveyard, and banish it. Basically, they want to send their Shaddoll monster to the graveyard so they can activate their other effects, so you can use Debunk to shut that play down, which is good. Up next, we have Chaos Trap Hole, which is a counter trap card where basically, whenever a light or dark monster would be summoned, any kind of summon, you could pay 2,000 life points, negate the summon, and if you do, banish it. So, pretty good. It's kind of like Solemn Warning, but just anti-light and dark. Unfortunately, it's a counter trap card, so if you're playing the Trap Tricks engine, unfortunately, you cannot search for this card. So that is a bummer. But it's still a good card overall to try out. Up next, we have Different Dimension Ground, another surprise trap card, which this turn any monster sent to the graveyard is removed from play instead. So it pretty much is Dimensional Fissure for one turn only, which is good whenever they make their big plays, or you just ram into their monster and trying to eliminate any possible options for them, so that way they cannot retrieve them through other cards for future plays. Now let's go to other cards that can disrupt this Shaddoll's main strategy. One is Curse Seal Forbidden Spell, which is a counter trap card where you can discard one spell card, negate the activation and the effect of its spell card, and destroy it. And if your opponent can activate that spell card or any copies of the spell card with the same name throughout the rest of the duel. So if you do it on Shaddoll Fusion, they cannot use Shaddoll Fusion throughout the rest of the duel. So this is a really, really devastating card. And I've seen decks that run a high spell count, so this could be very beneficial. Up next, we have Vanity's Emptiness. Whenever your opponent tries to activate Shaddoll Fusion, you just flip up Vanity's Emptiness and say, no, neither player can special summon a monster as long as Vanity's Emptiness is on the field. But do keep in mind that Vanity's Emptiness does self-destruct if a card is sent from deck or the field to your graveyard, it blows itself up. So do keep in mind. Vanity's Fiend. Basically, Of course, he cannot be special summoned, but while this card is on the field, neither player can special summon monsters, so they cannot utilizing their El Shaddoll plays and all that, because as long as he's on the field, he says no fusion summoning. Nothing. Nada. No. So that is a really strong play. Up next, we have the Quackimare Drago. Basically, he is the anti-Lion Dark monster, where pretty much his effect stated that neither player can special on light and dark monsters as long as he's sitting on the field. It's still at 1900 level 4 beater monster, so very good. And if you play a deck that revolves around like dragons, this card could be very beneficial and good to run, such as Dragon Ruler, since you can use Tempest effect to search for it, or Disaster Dragon and so forth. Next we have Rivalry of the Warlord. Since Shaddoll monster are multiple monster type, if you can limit their monsters, so this card can act like a floodgate. So if you don't know what Rivalry of the Warlord does, each player can only control one type of monster. Send all other face-up monsters they control to the graveyard. So this is pretty devastating. So they cannot make too expansive of their plays, but they can still set the monster. So do keep in mind. Up next, we have the Transmigration Prophecy. Target 2 cards in the graveyard, either player's graveyard, and shuffle those target into the deck. So you can reutilize anti-Shaddoll cards, or you can put back some of the cards from your opponent's graveyard back into their deck, so that way they cannot utilize their other card's effect to bring it back to from their graveyard to their hand. So when you're thickening their deck, so they might not draw their ideal cards to have an out against certain scenarios. So that can be pretty unique. And finally, we have the Chthonian Polymer. Whenever your opponent fusion summon a fusion monster, you can activate this card by attributing one monster on your side field and take control of that fusion monster permanently. So it's a funny trap card that can just add insult to your opponent. Just say, oh, that mid-range is now mine. Now you're the one who's now limited to one special summon per turn. So, pretty good card. Other cards I do have in the side, do have Goes and Match. Do keep in mind, majority of their Shaddoll monster are dark attributes. So once they get additional support, maybe Goes and Match might see more play. But for now, maybe it's not a good time to try Goes and Match. Maybe I could be wrong. It might work. Another card that I stumble upon and probably wonder if this works is Deep Dark Trap Hole. Whenever a level 5 or higher monster or monsters, effect monsters, special summon, banish that level 5 or higher effect monster or monsters. So I wonder if this works when they bring out Midrash or so forth. I'm not 100% sure, because I know like when you have Thunder King Ryo, he can only stop like Inherit special summon. He can't stop like if you activate a card effect to special summon a monster like Polymerization, Miracle Fusion, Fusion Gate, so forth. So do keep that in mind. Abyss Dweller, Armades, HCS Sihemias, which they're good against the Shaddoll cards, but do keep in mind that by having these cards out on the field, your opponent can freely utilize Shaddoll fusion straight from their hand and then send the fusion materials from their deck to the graveyard. So you have to be extremely careful when you do these kind of plays. So I hope you guys find this video very helpful. Leave a comment down below what you guys think. I have a feeling I might have missed some other cards, but this is a pretty long video. Stay tuned for more with ThoseYGOguys. The next video I'm going to be talking about how to combat against the upcoming quote forts in the future later down the months. So that will make his appearance. So do keep in touch with ThoseYGOguys, and I hope you guys enjoy it, and I'll see you guys later. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.